Hello there, my intrepid students. Welcome back to Conquering the JavaScript Interview. In today's episode, we're picking up after a little bit of a break in this algorithm data structure interview question series, and I'm picking back up in my Array Architects mini-series because I have a couple more that I still want to do, and again, I'm having a lot of fun making these, so we're going to dive into a fundamental array method that I somehow haven't covered yet because I thought it was too simple. But there is nothing too simple that you can't learn something from, and this one has a great surprise lesson, and that is something is a must-know method for all JavaScript devs, which is the map method. We're beginning crafting our very own array prototype custom map, but first, a word from this episode's sponsor, which is Covalence, where I work and make YouTube videos for. We have a fantastic link in the description down below to our community membership for $25 a month. You get access to our $25 a month, you get access to our front end and back end courses, which combine them. That's our full stack program. That's like 300 plus hours of content, lectures, walkthroughs, labs that you get to go through, and my standalone React course as well as any courses we add in the future, which I'm in the process of making one or two new ones that hopefully should be out soonish. You just get them for free as an added benefit in your community membership, and you get access to our Discord where you can have some supportive mentorship in your coding journey, as well, access to chatting with me more regularly than YouTube comments and attempting to try and get some content made if you have any ideas that you want to see done. So yeah, check that out in the description down below. Also check for a CODEPEN to this video's code if you want the prompt or you want to see the end code to watch along with me. And as always, I encourage you to write along with me wherever you can to understand what you're writing. Even if you don't know what's going on, writing along with me rather than just copying and pasting is a great exercise to at least begin to build that muscle memory. All right. So let's map our way to victory in JavaScript, right? So it's going to be DIY time in the wizarding world of arrays. We're about to forge our own custom map. Imagine we're an alchemist turning ordinary metals into gold. So here's a blueprint for what we got to do, right? The purpose of an array map is to transform each element of an array using a provided function. In the examples here, we see things like the map function, uppercasing strings, multiplying numbers by 2, or grabbing their square roots. Pretty simple. Something that you may not know is that the callback function has an optional context argument. If you go take a look in the MDN web docs, you'll even see it in the introduction of the parameters, meaning it has something called this arg as optional, a value to use as this when executing a callback function. So that's going to complicate things a little bit, and I'll show you what I mean by that with a practical code example rather than just saying it out loud. But remember, we're going to have some way to capture each element's input during our callback function, and that's where things get a little complex for this otherwise very simple method. Then the output is a new array where each element is the result of the callback function. So again, it seems pretty straightforward. I'll code something, show you why it fails, and then we'll talk about how to fix it and then actually fix it. And it's all done with 5 letters or 5 characters we have to type. So a whole bundle of errors that will be fixed by 5 simple characters we're going to type into our code, right? So let's go ahead and code out what we think will be pretty simple here, right? So every time I write one of these out, I gotta tell y'all that modifying the prototype in JavaScript, especially for built-in objects like arrays here, is often used in educational settings, like interviews or tutorials, to demonstrate a deep understanding of JavaScript's prototypal inheritance and inner workings that shows you know what you're doing. But in real-world projects, generally you want to avoid this because it can lead to unexpected behavior, conflicts with other libraries or scripts, and maintenance, the worst part, challenges. So we're going to write our own version here, and we're going to watch it actually crash and burn. And if you want to pause and try and implement it yourself, I do recommend you give it a shot and get in the comments if you're into this problem, and then you are like, aha, when you figure out, or if you knew, go ahead and flex on all of us, because again, I forgot this the first time I wrote it. So we're going to modify and add a new method to our array object prototype by saying, hey, we're going to have assign a function to our array method custom map, which will implement what array map does. Now, we know this needs to return a new array, so I'll go ahead and do the following. We'll set a resulting value and return that resulting value, which will be an empty array. So if we pass in, if we call this on an empty array or something like that, it should return an empty array with no modifications, and so this already kind of succeeds in that regard. From there, all we need to do is iterate over our array we're calling this on. Remember, the context of this Can be a little tricky in JavaScript, hint, hint. And in the context of inside of this custom map function, this will refer to the array we are calling it on. So if I grab the first example here, if I grab the first example and prepare to go ahead and like move it in here, so if we do something like this, yeah, that makes sense. We can do it this way. And then we're going to console log our array on custom map in our map function. There we go. So in the context of calling custom map, this will refer to the thing furthest to the left, which happens to be our array parameter right there, this array object, aka this input array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 number values. So if I write the keyword this inside of this code block, it will refer to the array we are calling it on. So what I'll have to do is simply call the callback on each element of the array. So we're going to set up a traditional for loop that will iterate over the length of the array for each index position, represented by this nice little for loop, I equals 0, I is less than array, or the array's length, aka this thing's length. Then all we need to do is push something into the resulting array. So we're going to say, hey, result, push into it. I'm not going to code a custom push method here. We're going to keep it simple. But I think I have another video that shows how to write a push method if you are interested. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and just write the push method on the resulting array. And all we need to do, you would think, is to say, oh, okay, we're going to have a callback function that we are going to simply invoke while we push things into the array. Now, remember, I said that this needs to take an optional parameter, and we're going to call it this arg. That's because we're going to follow what the MDN specs have us do that represents each thing we are running our callback on. So if our callback needs access to it, for example, we can pass it in. And this would represent this X right here. So this X value, which we know, if we're mapping over an array of numbers, each element of the array would be, well, the number value itself. And that was represented by this arg. So we're going to pass into our callback this arg, which would be what we're passing in, the number, right? And the element itself, we need access to its index position and the array itself should it be required. Now this is where it gets a little confusing because you're like, okay, well this satisfies the specifications. If you've watched any other of my array architects videos in this Conquering the JavaScript Interview playlist, we have written code that looks like this 8, 9, 10 times already with whenever I've done these videos on these array implementations. And this is where it gets kind of fun and unexpected, right? So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to see what happens. And we get the expected value, which is a bunch of knotted numbers. That is a result of the operation multiplying something that isn't a number by something that's not a number, right? So, I mean, rather, it attempts to multiply something that isn't a number multiplied by 2, which is a number, and that operation will fail. There's no coercion it can do, so there's no weird string shenanigans going on here. There's no implicit coercing happening. So that means something is going wrong in this process where the value we're passing in isn't represented by each thing. So let's go ahead and try and expand this map function down here. I'm going to switch to a non-implicit return and write it manually like that. I'm now going to console log x, and you're wondering, what is happening here? Look at that. Every single time it's popping up, it's coming up as undefined. What if I comment out this one and we take it a step backwards? We go, okay, what if we go into our array custom map, and why is this arg not being passed in correctly? Look at that. I saved the file, refreshed the window, the console here, and it's running a bunch of undefined still. Why is that the case, right? That is because we are not passing in the correct context of the keyword this. In the scope of this custom map, this refers to the array itself. What does it refer to down here? So if I go down to x console log this in its place, I'm going to comment this one out for comparison. So remember, we're simply toggling these console logs back and forth. We get a bunch of empty objects. Now, if I was in the browser, this might reference the global window object. I'm not sure what it references here. It probably just references the function itself, right? The map function variable is an object because functions are first-class objects in JavaScript. I'm wondering if that's what the representation is, interestingly enough. But nevertheless, like in strict mode, this would be undefined. inside of the browser, it would probably be the window or that global object. I'm wondering if this is like my node version here, because I'm not running this in the browser. I'm running this via node, and I'm guessing that might be the best representation of what I see there. But nevertheless, calling multiply by 2 on this is not giving us what we expect, hence why we're winding up with not a number. So this is why I said that this otherwise deceptively simple problem is going to have a fun lesson to unpack and learn inside of it, right? So we actually have to learn about a specific new thing. I'm going to comment this out so we can clear out our console window here. We're going to go focus on something new down here. And that is specifically the magic of the call method in JavaScript. So we're going to think of JavaScript as a point of view in a story. When you tell a story, which is like invoking a function, the perspective or the context might change depending on where the story is being told. Are you telling this like in a room full of people, to your parents, to your friend? All that, the context of reading the room, so to speak, the perspective, right? That context can change depending on where you're saying it. So it's important to know that, right? So using the .call method is like saying, tell this story from the point of view of my object. Without the call method, the story might be told from the wrong perspective, leading to confusion or incorrect outcomes, which is exactly what we see up here. Because we're allowing where the story is being told to alter the perspective or the context of this changes. And that might lead to the unexpected results of the not a number array we saw a moment ago. So if we use the call method to say, hey, when you call this function or tell this story, make sure you use the context that I want you to. And when you tell it, that way we can customize that context and end up with the result we want, right? So I kind of want you to think of call as like a teleportation spell. It's going to teleport the context of this into the callback function. So we're going to say, hey, pass a specific context into this callback function that we want you to, right? Otherwise, without it, the this in the callback might end up being undefined or pointing to a bad object. And we're going to make sure that this spell we're casting is going to be called with the right magical components or ingredients. So basically we have to figure out why this thing being passed in and this being passed in are being redefined down here. That's because of the context of when this story is being told. So to fix this entire problem, all we need to do, like I said, is add 5 simple characters after callback. And before we call it, we're simply going to write the 5 characters .call, aka .call. This will wind up. This will now allow us to correctly console log this value. And, I'm going to show you that it works first off. Well, clearly this is not what I wanted inside of here. It should be X, right? Yeah, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is actually the numbers now. Remember, without 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this arg was a bunch of undefines. But if I pass in call, or if I write in call, we now get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, in the context of this function, when it's made, it's still the global object. So that would make sense then I think about it. But yeah, now we're overriding what it is with this arg as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So why is that such a major difference? Like I said, it's all about the perspective of when it's being called. So let me show you a code example of how .call can be learned, right? So here's an example when we try to use like a method from an object without call. So we're going to do const my object equals curly braces, has a value of 10, and let's put in a similar looking thing here called multiply. It'll be a multiply method that will take a parameter called x that will return x multiplied by this object's .value property. Then I'm going to have function standalone func, where I'm going to provide it 2 params, a callback and x, aka our this arg function, that will say return the callback call with the x value. Okay? So from there, all I need to do is console log a call to my standalone func, where I'm going to pass in my object's multiply function as the callback with an x value of 5. So I'm passing in to standalone func a callback, which is my object dot multiply. So it should be this method, what it does, right? And x will be the value it takes. And we're going to, x is the value standalone function takes, and it passes into the callback, which will be this value x, which will return x times this value. But as we see here, once again, we got not a number because this dot value becomes undefined because it is no longer refers to my object. So it's either the global object or undefined if we're in strict mode or here in node. So if I console log this, we can see we get the node object. So we get like the node object, it looks like here, like the node global object. So that's what happened here. This looks like, yeah, what's going on. So if I do this dot value, that is not a thing, aka undefined. Undefined multiplied by 5, as you can see here, gets us, well, not a number because that's not really a thing. So all we need to do is place on dot call down here like that. We're going to pass in another param here called this arg. And what this allows us to do, right, is it passes in this arg and that value. There we go. So this will allow us to now call and explicitly set the this object to my object, unlike what we saw a moment ago, which was the global object, right? So this ensures this dot value refers to my object dot value, resulting in the still incorrect multiplication, because it looks like it passed in, because I'm in a node environment and not in the browser. This is acting kind of goofy again, I can see. Or I just forgot something specifically here. Oh, because I need to pass in this arg, which would be my object. There we go. That's what I needed to do. Yeah, okay, cool. So I had to pass in this arg, which is my object, into my standalone function, right? So this is the corrected version. That's what I forgot to do there. Now I passed in my object, which has a this dot value, right? As we can see here, the console log this now successfully is my object. We multiply this dot value, which my object has that property, which is 10. 5 times 10 gets us an outputted value of 50, and that's what call ends up doing, right? So like I said, remember, it's like a point of view. We need call to pass in the correct context of this. So when we call our callback, it has a context that we want and not an incorrect one. So I know it can be a little bit confusing, and hopefully the analogy serves you better than this code example, because I hate that I messed it up in the middle of there, but it is what it is. So yeah, that's call's purpose, right? Making sure we have our correct context of this and why it's important to have it back up here. So I'm going to go down yonder and comment this code out because it is done in our example here, and we're back to our simple custom map array method, and that's all it took there. Explaining why we need the dot call there hopefully makes sense. If you want a separate video on these array methods of like call, apply, and this, call and apply are like the same thing except in how you present their parameters. And dot bind, it's call, bind, and apply. That's what it was. Yeah. So call and apply, I believe, are similar, except how you pass in their parameters, and bind is a little bit different, and it returns a copy of your function back to you. But nevertheless, call is important in this case. Hopefully the analogy of that story point of view perspective makes sense. If you could even say that during your interview, it would show that you have an understanding of it, even if you mess up the syntax like I did. But again, I'm human. Even though I rehearsed for this video more than I cared to admit, I still make the dumbest of mistakes, even if I write myself a script to try and follow. Somehow life finds a way, and I managed to find a way to add in mistakes even after practicing dozens of times. But hey, welcome to a live performance, right? Says guy in a recording where you could edit out the mistake, but I don't like editing out my mistakes. So the more important thing is, can we now change up our inputs and have them correctly log what we expect them to see here? So in this case, we're going to be uppercasing a bunch of strings. Does it work as we expect it to? Our map function now becomes a little bit different. It uppercases our fruits there, no problem. If I take these numbers and I call their square root, does that generate what's expected as well? So let's go ahead and grab those in our map function. And our input should get us 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 is 2, 9 is 3, 16 is 4. Yeah, so it calls a square root on it just fine. So yeah, it's a surprisingly simple implementation that has a surprisingly difficult to understand problem beneath it, which is why I didn't choose to do .map early on in the Array Architect series, despite it being a game changer. It rocks. We all probably and should be using it all the time. It's great for transforming data. teaching fundamentals, as you can see here, and even gaining a deeper understanding and tweaking what it needs to do or what specialized tasks it needs to accomplish. So it's more than just a coding exercise. It's really strengthened about our core JavaScript skills and understanding when it comes to manipulating data and understanding the context of this specifically. So that's a wrap on .map and our very own custom map implementation of it, as well as a side lesson about the call method in JavaScript. So if you enjoyed the walkthrough and want to see more, hit that like button, do the YouTube stuff, and subscribe to us. I try and put out 3 videos a week at minimum. My coworkers add videos around that. I try and always read the comments. Sometimes I'm better about reading them in batches after some time has passed, but I do see them, so make sure if you have any additional videos you'd like to see, drop a comment below. Stay tuned for more JavaScript journeys in our next episodes, and keep on coding. And remember, every line of code is a step towards mastering JavaScript. See you next time.